All right, guys, I'm here today with a good friend of mine, Jan Moss. And Jan, I want to tell you that you were on the top of my list of people to talk to, and I'm so glad I got you.
Well, I am glad to talk to you because you're one of my favorite people.
Oh, well, thank you. Hey,
You're one of the very few men involved in advocacy.
I'm going to tell how I met. I got to hear you speak twice. You were a keynote speaker twice. One was I think, kind of an emergency. You came in to speak. They were supposed to have Temple Grandin's mom,
Yes, yes.
and she couldn't make it because she had an ear infection. And so they said, Jan Moss is speaking. And I had already seen you once, and I thought, as much as I want to see Temple's mom, I'm so glad I get to see Jan again. It was, I love your speeches, but here's the thing. After I got done, the first time I met you, or the first time I heard you speak, I thought, I want to meet this lady. And something happened, and probably I was a little too embarrassed to even go talk to you, or shy or something. But the second time I thought, I'm going to talk to this lady no matter what. And you just embraced me and said, hey, I'm so glad to see you. And we talked for probably a good 5-10 minutes. And I'm so glad I did, because now every time I see you, we have to say hi. And I'm glad I got to meet you on that different level there. So
Well, I was thrilled to meet you because, like I say, I had heard so many good things about you and what you were doing, and that here was a father involved. And so frequently they can't be for one reason or another. Um, and so it was just delightful. And you've been so successful. I'm really proud of you.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. So tell me your story. Tell me how you got into advocacy in general.
Well, in general, it came about, of course, with Jennifer, my daughter, who is deaf and has cerebral palsy. And she was just, to me, the most important thing at the time. And I was trying to get a general diagnosis for the specific purposes of knowing what services I would want to get. And at the time, there was a kind of a fledgling group of parents who had children who were deaf or hard of hearing. And so I met with them and learned quite a bit. And so we became involved in the precursor to the current organization. And I'm trying to think of the name of it. But anyway, it was DIAL, Deaf Information Action Line. And so we got community support for that. And so I began to learn from the other parents. And that was my best source of learning always. And not without its problems, because all parents don't think alike. And anyway, that's how it got started. And then I was also involved with the JD because I took Jennifer down there for physical therapy. And I was invited by Harper Orth, who was head of the J.D. McCarty Center at the time, to fly to Dallas to speak at the national hearings for Public Law 94-142. And so I flew down there and gave my testimony and did the interviews and, met so many other families trying to get public school education going. I mean, think how long ago that's been. That's been a long time. So that just kind of plugged me in to getting information and kind of telling me how to go about visiting with other families. And there was just this little phrase that I used in meeting other families and meeting with people in organizations, and that was, if it's true of me, uh, is it true of you? And if it's true of us, how many others is it true of? And so I just kind of used that for a conversation, which is really all it was, and to get to meet other families and find out what their issues were, and then to go to people who may be controlling the funds of those organizations or the ideology of those organizations and that kind of thing. And then years later, I went to work for the PTI,
Yeah.
and worked for many years with the PTI. And from there, I went to work at the University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities out of College of Medicine.
Wow. All right. Well, and then came along somewhere in there, Jason.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Well, Jennifer was 10
mhm.
when Jason was born, and he really he had issues from birth on. Failure to thrive, and then they discovered he had a significant heart defect, pulmonary stenosis. And so they elected to do surgery on him when he was about 7 months old. And he also had some hip dysplasia, quite a number of things. And then when he was about 3, he started having seizures. And those seizures have remained uncontrolled all these years, and he's 42. So he fell into a category of kind of special health care needs. And so that put me in contact with a lot of other families who had kids that were at risk because of just having their health care needs met. And so there's Jason Moss, and he has given me lots of material over the years.
Yeah, I think
some of it you can't repeat.
Yeah, well, I think we can repeat anything on here because this is our. I mean, it's not going. This isn't public television. We can do whatever.
Okay, good,
Um,
good.
I love the Jason stories. I mean, the Jennifer stories are great too, but I love the Jason stories. Before we get into a funny one, I kind of want to ask you about. Tell me the story about the doctor, and you got you. How do I set this up without telling too much? You kind of were at home, and your husband told you, um, basically that all you have to do is love.
Oh, that is my Dale's story.
Yeah. Okay.
Jason's daddy. Um, I was distraught, needless to say, as all the surgeries and X-rays and doctor's appointments and all of this. We were on waiting lists for the surgeries, and I just went to bed and covered up my head. I mean, I'd get up and feed Jason, and I'd get Jennifer off to school and that kind of thing. But I was totally just wiped out emotionally and mentally, and thinking, oh my gosh, I've had 10 years to get used to the issues that Jennifer faces. And now I'm confronted with this medically fragile little boy who needed attention every hour. I was sleep deprived and all of that. Anyway, Dale came in one morning and sat down beside me, and he said, Jan, don't you think you could get up today and stay up a little while? And I said, no, I don't. And I explained to him, all my feelings. And he just smiled. And he said, honey, you don't have to do anything other than take care of this baby. He said, I don't care if he ever goes to school, if he ever walks, if he ever talks. I don't care anything about that. Because the way I see it, all we have to do is love him. That's all we're required to do. Can you do that, sweetheart? And I said, yes, of course, And that really changed things, because I was kind of feeling like I had to be super mom or something. And here was this very nice man saying, all you have to do is get up and love the baby. And of course, we both did.
Yeah. And how true is that? And how many parents, whether mom's, dad, whatever the case may be, have felt that same way? I don't think I can do any more. I
Mhm.
don't think I can do this. And the truth is, all we have to do is love. That's it.
That's the most important thing, because that allows us to enjoy our kids,
Yeah.
and sometimes that's really hard to do. I know it's really hard to
Sure.
do. But nevertheless, if you're centered on not what kind of grades he's making, can he read, can he walk? I know I have had families say, oh, if my child could just walk. And I'd say, well, if he can't, then what's some good ways he can get around?
Okay.
That kind of thing. Can't talk? Well, you somehow have figured out, what he's saying. So let's just get a plan out for how others can learn what he's saying. And that's love leading the way, as
Yeah.
far as I'm concerned, anyway.
Yeah, I get a lot of what I call newly diagnosed parents, and one of the first things they ask is, how can I get my son to talk? And so I have to remind them, talking, communicating are two different things. I can
Mhm.
communicate. Can he tell you when he's hungry, when he's thirsty? Can he tell you what he wants? And even if it's not verbally, it's still communication, and that's all you need.
Yes, communication is a set of skills that uh, are shared between you and whomever you're communicating with. But it's not the same as being able to verbalize.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
So in your speeches, I kind of alluded to Jason, because I think he steals the show some of the time, in your speeches that are in your talks. And I I can't get you off of here without asking you to tell the registration story.
Registration.
Yeah, when you're 18, you have to register
Oh,
for the
yes. Yes.
draft.
Okay. Well, that all started because he was getting ready to go to camp. And so, you're getting all the underwear out and the socks and everything and putting their initials on it. Why? I don't know, because they never come home with their own underwear. They just always come home with somebody else's. But anyway, we're doing all that, and Jason is helping me. Well, sort of. He's coming in periodically and looking at the stuff I'm putting into his bag to take to camp, and he said, just very seriously, Jim Moss, uh, he has never called me mother. He still doesn't call me mother or mom, calls me Jen Moss. And he said, Jen Moss, I have something to tell you. And I said, oh, well, okay, what is it? And he said, I am in puberty. And I said, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Well, good for you. And so then he toddled off doing something else. And then pretty soon he comes back, Jim Moss. And I said, what? And he said, you know what puberty does? And I said, well, yeah, I have a good idea what puberty does, but it's better if you talk to your daddy about that. And he said, okay, I talked to my dad. And so then he comes back again and he says, Jan Moss, did you know that puberty makes my little man stand up? And I said, oh, yes, that's what happens. And you do need to talk to your dad. So within that very same week, we get a card stating that Jason has to register for the draft. And Dale traveled, and so he comes back in town, and I said, okay, they're saying we've got to call in, or Jason's got to call in, but he, of course, doesn't use the phone. And he said, well, just call him. So I called him, and I reached a gentleman, and I said, I'm calling for my son, Jason Moss. And I gave the pertinent information, and he said, why are you calling? Why isn't he calling? And I said, well, he has phone fear. And the guy said, phone fear? And I said, yes, he will not use the phone. He has autism, and he has other kinds of disabilities, and I went on and on. And the guy said, lady, just fill out that card and write down the disabilities that are provable. I'm sure he was referring to phone fear. I didn't tell him he had pocket fear too, but anyway. So I have my little card, and I'm writing down all this stuff, and Dale comes in. And I'm getting ready to submit this. And Dale says, well, did you tell him what Jason said? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, what Jason tell you? And I said, oh, yeah. That day we were discussing puberty. Jason came in, getting this stuff ready to go to camp. And he said, Jim Moss. And I said, what? And he said, I problem solved. And I said, well, what was it? And he said, if my little man gets real long, can we buy it a shoe? And I said, absolutely, not a problem. And so Dale said, on your card? And I said, what? And he said, you didn't list may need 3 shoes. And I wrote it on there, and we mailed it in. We never heard any more from him.
I love that story because it. I mean, you know, people don't understand what you go through every day, and to tell that story, I can't. I would love to see his face when he said needs 3 shoes. What does that even? You know, and it'd be lost on him. But
they need 3 shoes. Whoa.
I love that. So when in advocacy, I've always looked up to people that have been through things that I haven't been through, because I can only tell people what I know, which is how far along Connor has gotten. And I didn't realize until today that, you know, Jason's the same age as I am. So
yes, you could be my
baby. So I look up to people like you and Wanda Felty and those people that have been through the things that I've been through, and you guys are our mentors. Tell me, who were your mentors? Who were people that you know helped you out along the way?
Oh, well, I would have to say some of them were professionals. For Jennifer, probably the teachers, in essence, at the preschool for the deaf and hearing impaired at Keys Speech and Hearing Center at the time. If you think about what the issues were in finding mentorship way back then, there was almost none. And it was, whether it was legal or perceived as legal, um, or illegal, I might say, is you were not allowed to contact other family members. And so uh, in the waiting room where the family sat waiting for the preschool class to end, we would visit back and forth about what we had heard and what we knew. And there were a couple of other mothers. One mother who had 4 children, and her daughter, who was hearing impaired and visually impaired, was the youngest. And so we would visit back and forth about what would be typical in their family. And that helped a lot. So also, my sister had 2 children, and Jennifer kind of fell in between their ages. And so I looked at what were they doing. And the family part for advocacy really came into more on a national scene when I began to meet family leaders in other states that had already developed services for children with disabilities and children with special health care needs. And Susan Ewan, of course, if you haven't met Susan, you need to meet her. She's currently president of the Exceptional Parenting, and that is a group that supports people with disabilities who have children. And she, on a national level, just was remarkable for me to meet because she was so accomplished, both in advocacy and in the part about working with families who had very, very different ways of thinking than we had at the time. So Susan Ewan, in this state, it was just my peers, I think. And then later on, of course, you have great heroes in the field. Judy Heumann. You have, I'm trying to think, there was a couple out of Kansas. Can't think of their name, but anyway, they were educators. And then North Carolina had wonderful early intervention and early education programs, and they were very progressive for the attention that preschoolers need. And so I became and am a firm and staunch supporter of Early Head Start and all the early programs, and some of the books and things that have been issued about that very, very early on brain connections. It's the scientific part of babies. My gosh, they are just cooking. Those synapses are happening and all those things, and how terribly important it is to realize they are like a little computer chip just being fed all this information. And gosh, we have got to just pay attention to that and keep the atmosphere for them healthy. And by healthy, I mean lots of rest, lots of love, lots of good nutrition, lots of stimulation. That little brain is just a cooking and a popping, and they they really are. Babies are just amazing. I when I think about the all the influences early intervention has, I just get really excited. Really excited.
Yeah, and we've come a long way. I mean,
Oh,
uh,
oh my goodness, yes.
yeah. So tell me, some advice that what maybe the best piece of advice you've ever received, or what advice do you give to parents?
Well, the first thing, of course, is just love your kid. And that leads you in, if you love someone, you provide for them the kind of affection and stimulation they need to grow healthy with regards to their emotions. And that's emotional intelligence is another form of communication. And we really need to think about that more and more, I think. I would tell them to allow themselves to enjoy their child. Um, Try not to do a lot of comparing. It's totally unfair to compare apples and oranges. If your child is so medically fragile that sunlight can alter their respiration, then no, playground isn't that important, you know.
Right.
Just thinking about that, it really helps if you learn truly about the disability. And I think, I know Jennifer, I didn't realize how little she knew about deafness. I knew a lot about it, but we're watching TV one night and she's wanting to know how the movie ends. And I'm telling her, I don't know. Well, she's getting madder and madder at me, and she picks up the TV clicker and she's just going to bong me with it. And we're wrestling over that, and I'm trying to sign to her and saying, what is wrong? And she said, you know how the movie ends. And I said, I do not. And she said, you know what people in airplanes are talking about. And I said, Jennifer, I can't hear as high as an airplane. And then just a light bulb went on in my head. And I thought, my gosh, she doesn't know the limits of hearing. And I thought, how in the world have we gotten this far? And I have no understanding of what she really knows about hearing.
Hmm.
And see, that's really important. The other thing that she was a revelation about was what I call mirror skills, and trying to work with her on her chewing and her swallowing and things like that. And we would have her look in the mirror, you know. And she had almost no mirror skills. It was all she could do to concentrate on her chewing and her swallowing, and she couldn't do those things all at the same time. And I think sometimes we forget, while trying to achieve one thing or multiple things, that there's a logical process that your mind goes through. And for some of our kids, that process is interrupted by a place that isn't there. And so my saying always was, you can't go a place that isn't there. And so if there's a connection that was never made, it may never be made. And so what do? You take a detour. A disability is a detour. It's the road nobody chooses, but we arrive there. And so we have to be willing to, think out of the box. I know everybody says that all the time. And the other thing I say all the time is they are not broken. I don't think Jennifer and Jason, either one, are broken. They just are who they are. And for Jason, a very important thing is, in many children with disabilities and adults with disabilities, for that matter, live in the moment. And so we think they're cranky and we think they're not being good and all that. But if you live in the moment, that moment, if it's bad, you perceive it being bad forever. And so, being uncomfortable. I know Jennifer, back when she was little, they put her in leg braces, and those could pinch you on occasion. And I thought, oh my gosh, she's going to think that she's going to be pinched for the rest of her life. And I know that sounds strange, but many of our kids live in the moment, live for that day only. And you have to think about, this needs to be a day that they want to have, because if it isn't, my gosh, what's the incentive for tomorrow? And anticipating that it would be as hard for them as the situation might be currently.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely.
I babble a lot.
No. In fact, some things I'm going through right now with Connor, that makes perfect sense. So yeah, absolutely. You know what? I that's all I've got, and I am so thankful for you, for your friendship, for agreeing to do this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so flattered, and you've said so many nice things.
Well, just know, you definitely are a huge influence on me as an advocate, as a parent, and I know you have been for a lot of people. So, just the time that you've taken to talk to me today, I appreciate you so much, and I appreciate our friendship. I'm glad that I took the time and went and talked to you. So,
well, I am thrilled, and I am so, as I say, proud of you for what you are doing. Not only just for your kids, you realize a good advocate really is doing something for a whole lot of kids. And I hope that makes you feel like this difficult job, and it's difficult to try and maintain your positive attitude during some of the things that happen. So I'm very proud of you, and I'm proud of your wife.
yeah,
because she has to live with you.
Yeah, and she's amazing. I always tell people, look, she's the brains, I'm just the mouth.
Well, isn't that wonderful? You know your body parts.